Okay, everybody. These are your colonialism notes, or you can call them Puritan notes. I don't care. You can label them what this PowerPoint is. I just want you to know that this is colonial literature that we're going to be studying first. We need to understand how Puritan literature affected America and how history affected Puritan literature. The first thing I need you to know is what the Puritans are. I know that if you've had U.S. history, you probably know what the Puritans are, but we're just going to recap. Basically, they're Protestants who didn't like the way the Church of England was functioning. They wanted a pure form of religion, and they fled because they felt persecuted. They believed that religion was personal, that your preacher couldn't come between you and God. They were led by William Bradford. We could read of Plymouth Plantation, but we normally don't because you've probably read it in history class anyway. Most people believed, or most Puritans believed, that that all of humanity was going to be damned by the sin of Adam and Eve, okay? By taking fruit from the apple tree, or, from the tree of life, or whatever you want to call it, okay? They did believe in predestination. I need you to know that term, but that is where God has already chosen who is going to be saved and who is going to hell. They valued self-reliance, working hard, doing everything in moderation, and extremely simple living. Basically, if it was fun, it was a sin, okay? If you could do anything with it that didn't have to do with God or the Bible, it was a sin. As far as politics goes, there's a contract or covenant between God and humanity. The idea is that the government stems from that contract. It's very undemocratic. It's like, oh, well, I am chosen by God, therefore I should have the power to rule. Well, that can also lead to problems later on. It can lead to people abusing power. Okay, the Bible provided a model for salvation, okay? They were constantly looking for God and the Bible in their immediate lives, okay? I stubbed my toe, well, that's God looking, making me do something. There's a reason. I'm late for church, well, God must have had a reason for making me late. They did use writing to explore their lives. Lots of it is journal or diary entries, personal narratives. Some of it is poetry. We're going to be reading Anne Bradstreet. A lot of it is religious sermons. But most of them are going to be very plain. It's going to be very clear expression. Not a lot of metaphors unless it's poetry, but not a lot of complex things to understand. It's going to be pretty straightforward. They wanted everyone, no matter what the IQ, to be able to understand what they were saying about God and the Bible. There are many major authors. We are going to be focusing on two. We're focusing on Anne Bradstreet and Jonathan Edwards. Anne Bradstreet writes poetry. Jonathan Edwards, we're going to be studying Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It's a very famous sermon. Bradford, I do want you to know about him, even though you're not going to read him. He did write of Plymouth Plantation. He did a lot of, diary entries. He described the problems they faced once they got over here. They also demonstrated an unshakable belief in God. I need you to know what plain style writing is, so go ahead and use this definition. It's very easy to remember, but the plain style writing is going to be on your test. So use that definition. I wouldn't write anything else. I would just write plain style of writing. I do need you to write this. Anne Bradstreet. She does all kinds of things. We are going to be reading To My Dear and Loving Husband, Upon the Burning of Our House. There are a few more that we're going to read. She was actually from England. She still had family in England. And I think it was her brother. I think her brother published some of her poetry without her knowing. She talks about, her religion, her relationship with God, how, that relationship is affected by things that happen in everyday life, how she sees God in her everyday life. She talks a lot about her husband and her family and how that relationship is very godly. The difference here is because it's poetry, there is going to be metaphor, there are going to be metaphors in this. It's going to be very laden with symbolism and imagery, and I'm going to have you annotate poetry. Okay, Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards, I'm going to go ahead and say it, he's boring. You're not going to like him, but the good news is I don't make you read the whole thing. I only make you read a little bit. If any of you have ever been to an old line primitive Baptist church, I grew up old line primitive Baptist. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this again. I don't care what you believe. You just have to look at it from the literary point of view, okay? But I grew up old line primitive Baptist, foot washing. You're not supposed to cut your hair. You're not supposed to wear makeup. You're not supposed to wear pants if you're a woman. They do a lot of preaching about, well, if you don't do this, you're going to hell. Well, this is the fire and brimstone imagery. It talks about a very angry God. He does bring about the Second Great Awakening. He's very tyrannical, very strict. He thought that humans were, lowly. He is considered the last Puritan because the Second Great Awakening actually brings about, and you need to write this, the Second Great Awakening is where he says that, people have gotten too lax. They're too far away from the Puritan belief systems, and they need to get back to that. They need to go back to a purer and more strict form of Christianity or Puritanism. Okay, you need these in your notes because you're going to be using them tomorrow, and they go in your Unit 1 section. Have a nice rest of the weekend.